Good evening, sir. Dean, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yes, okay.
Dean sir, very good evening, sir.
Sir, my voice came sir.
Sir, please unmute your mic, sir. Dean sir. Yes, sir.
Now only that monitor is coming.
No problem, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Sridhar. Yarajamurthy, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
TRM, sir, good evening,
Good
sir.
evening, sir.
Murali, shall we start?
Yes, sir. We can start, sir. So, Doctor sir will join another 2 to 3 minutes subsequently.
Good afternoon, everyone who have joined this webinar today. So it's one of the series of webinars organized by Sri Ramakrishna Hospital bi-monthly, and I welcome all the consultants from the hospital and doctors from the hospital, and also the general practitioners from outside the hospital, from the city of Coimbatore, and also consultants from Coimbatore who have logged in. Today's speaker is Dr. Sridhar Gobal. He is postgraduate in transfusion medicine, and he has completed his postdoctoral fellowship from CMC Vellore on hematology and hematological disorders. And today he is going to talk about the COVID-19, on the effects of COVID-19 on hematological parameters. And he is going to present a variety of cases. And actually, the post-COVID scenario has become an important topic in general medicine now. And many premier institutions like Madras GH, they have started a department of post-COVID-19 sequelae. So the hematological sequelae post-COVID-19, a case-based approach, is going to be presented by Dr. Sridhar Gobal. And after joining this institution, he has done a lot to the institution, and he has also specialized in the transplantation, bone marrow transplantation. And I welcome Dr. Sridhar Gobal, and I can take over the stage.
Good evening, sir. So good evening, one and all present here. First of all, I'd like to thank our institution, Ramakrishna Hospital, for arranging such an wonderful academic enclave. And it's my pleasure and privilege to be a part of this academic enclave. So today, for the next half an hour or so, I will try to discuss about COVID-19 and hematological parameters. So COVID-19, basically the most sounded and the most heard word as of 2020 and 2021, I think it's going to be COVID-19. So almost every disease has an association with COVID. That's what there are a number of case reports which is being presented almost on every day-to-day basis. So I'll be discussing about COVID-19 and hematological parameters, because as we all know, all the viral illness has some hematological problems, and hematological parameters generally tends to change with any viral illness. Of course, COVID-19 is not an exception. So the next half an hour or so, I will be discussing about the COVID-19 and the hematological parameters. It will be basically a case-based approach, and I'm trying to discuss the topic of the patients with such scenarios like lymphopenia, lymphocytosis, leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, increased D-dimer, increased ferritin. Basically, all these are hematological concerns what are solved in hospital basis. So, hope my screen is being visualized by everyone here. So when the screen is visible, sir, Dean sir.
It is visible, sir.
Yeah, okay, sir. Okay, I shall proceed now. So I will, before going to topic per se, I will just put a disclaimer also. So basically, I'm not discussing about the management part of COVID. I will try to restrict myself to the hematological aspects and the variations in the various hematological parameters as far as COVID is concerned. So whatever case I'm discussing is basically most of them will be the consultants will be a different specialties, and they would have sought for the opinions from hematology point of view, and I will try to discuss about few cases of our own hematological department. So as we all know about the pathogenesis of COVID, so it's again well discussed in the recent past. So it's basically the COVID is almost similar to the COVID, the SARS-CoV-1 and the MERS virus. SARS-CoV-1 almost has some 80% similarity to that of the previous virus of SARS-CoV and 49% similarity of the MERS, that is the Middle East respiratory virus. So basically, similar to those virus, it gets attached to the cell by means of the receptor, that is ACE2 receptor, and the TMPRS, that is the transmembrane metalloproteinase receptor, so which results in the activation of this COVID once get attached. Basically, it is engulfed by means of endocytosis. Subsequently, when it goes into the cell, it results in the activation of the virus. So this is the general flow chart of COVID-19. Almost, I think so, most of the doctors here are familiar with. So usually in the initial period of time, subsequent when it is inhaled in the nasal epithelium, so there happens a few viral replication, but usually that is limited to that particular part, and that will be limited immune response. So there itself, almost containment of the virus and the infection occurs, and there will be clearance in almost 80% of the patients. So which usually there will be some mild symptoms in the form of cough, cold, fever, some loose, generalized body ache, and malaise, easy fatigability, which is usually settled within a period of 2 weeks. But 1/5 of the patient goes to the second part of the COVID illness, where it is called as a U-shaped curve. So this when gets into the lower respiratory tract, and subsequently it affects the AC inhibitors in the alveolar epithelial cells, where the detrimental part arises. Basically, the cytokine wave initially will be formed by means of release of the various cytokines like interleukins and other chemokines. It eventually leads on to cytokine storm, which results in the ultimately all the ARDS part and subsequently end-organ damage and death. So this cytokine storm, there are a number of inflammatory response and a number of inflammatory markers which usually rises in COVID. But there are few important cytokines which we have to take into account, and which we were monitoring in previous almost 2 to 3 months before, like interleukin 6 and other interleukins also. So, but nowadays again, this interleukin part is not being monitored as per the recent guidelines from various institutions. So again, this is again very good journal from Lancet, which basically said that there are 4 horsemen which leads on to viral apocalypse. Here, if you see all the phases or all the curves actually have some amount of hematological aspect into that. So when the SARS-CoV infection will attaches to the AC inhibitors, finally leads on to decreasing the receptors. This eventually increases the AC enzyme. So this AC enzyme alone, which leads on to platelet dysfunction, and subsequently with the increase in the cytokines and the chemokines, this leads on to vascular leakage, and subsequently this reduces the nitric oxide and the PGE2, that's the prostacyclines, which are eventually the vasodilators. So what happens is the vasoconstriction also happens, platelet activation happens along with the platelet dysfunction, and this also leads on to thrombin generation. So eventually all the thrombotic episodes eventually arises over a period of time, and finally the almost thrombotic part which sets in, resulting in activation of the platelets, and subsequently all the D-dimer and the procoagulin part also increases. There also happens to be some sort of lymphopenia, that is again because of the upper process of the alveolar epithelial cells, and leads on to the activation. And the various mechanisms of lymphopenia I will be discussing in the subsequent slides. So all these four completely leads on to diffuse alveolar damage, acute lung injury, ARDS, and finally, last but not least, is the end organ damage and death. So in all these curves, actually the hematology aspect is inculcated in that. So there happens again like many questions, why only those certain people, that is 15 to 20% are affected, rest 80% are usually have some minimal symptoms and getting recovered. So again, there were initial phases of infections. There were many theories saying that the patient who with multiple comorbidities like sugar, BP, and other comorbid illness have some higher degree of fatality. Of course, that holds true. But in the recent researches, they found that this happens to be some association with HLA polymorphism, where certain HLA patients with certain HLA groups have some increased susceptibility to that virus, and certain HLA has some protection to it also. So the HLA, like HLA-B, 4001, HLA-B 0703, generally has an increased susceptibility to that of the infection, and the fatality and the mortality also increases, along with morbidity also. Whereas the certain HLA part, this actually gives some protection to that of the SARS-CoV infection. So, giving about all those introduction, I will straight away move on to case scenarios. So, case number one is a 7-year-old baby. Again, 7-year-old because in the first phase or first wave of COVID, which usually like almost most of the adults and oldest people are infected. In second phase, almost the pediatric age group also are getting infected. So first case is basically a 7-year-old baby who is admitted in pediatric ward unit. Basically, this baby presented with the complaints of fever, cough for 3 days, generalized tiredness, loss of appetite, loss of smell, loss of taste, everything as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Again, here the RT-PCR found to be positive, and this patient opinion was solved because of the severe bicytopenia when the platelet count was 33,000 and the WBC count was 2,600 with lymphocytosis, almost 66%. Again, usually in the pediatric age, especially in the less than 2 years of old babies, the lymphocytes usually will be there around 60%. As the age advances, the lymphocyte usually comes to less than 40% in adults. But this 7-year-old with the lymphocyte 66, of course, it is slightly on the higher side, but still that has to be further investigated. So examination-wise, there was much of the child was otherwise active and afebrile, no palpable nose, no hepatosplenomegaly, no purpura or any other bleeding episodes, no petechiae, no even oral cavity there was no blood purpura. Vital was stable. Otherwise, the child was active and the viral markers were negative. So why I am saying about 7-year-old with lymphocytosis? Of course, my suspicion will be higher end for the acute leukemias, which usually present in this age group, and usually the patient will have a similar sort of illnesses with a fever, cough, cold, with URI for almost more than 2 weeks or 1 to 2 weeks, subsequent loss of weight, loss of appetite, which usually happens in acute leukemia also. So my priority or my concern will be acute leukemia. So anyway, checking for the peripheral smear, there was no abnormal cells and there was no clumps either. Again, why I am stressing on no clumps is that there were scenarios where the platelet counts were in the 20,000 range, but this happens to be a pseudothrombocytopenia, what is called as EDTA-induced platelet satellitism. Because sometimes, if at all EDTA samples, so these platelets tend to get, there will be some activation of the platelets in the EDTA, subsequently leads on to formation of granules. And this usually have some platelet aggregation. So in the culture, there can be some pseudo thrombocytopenia. So this has to be rolled out whenever we see any sort of thrombocytopenia. So here in the peripheral smears, there was no clumps or no abnormal cells. But since the counts was also less, especially total number of 2,000, sometimes it may not be picked up in peripheral smear also. So I will just give a glimpse of how the child progressed over a period of time. So again, I will just say about the day of illnesses, that is day of onset of symptoms. So this is very, very important as far as hematology is concerned, because as we all know, this is the first wave, or the first wave of COVID, where usually there will be a period of viremia, and most of the people have some symptoms like fever, cough, cold, all those things, but usually will be settling down in day 4 to day 7, and usually after day 8 they may not have any symptoms. But if at all some patients develop the same sort of symptoms or signs after day 8, then it can be because of the immune reaction, so that has to be dealt with in a more vigilant manner. So this child basically presented to us with the day 3 of illness. At that time, the count was 72,000 platelet count, and the WBC count was almost 2,300. But opinion was sought on day +5 with a platelet count of 33,000, with a WBC of almost 2,700, with the lymphocytes of almost 62%. So here we had a question mark. So on day 5 of illness, the child, there was a progressive nature of all the bicytopenias. So should we intervene? Is the question. So again, we discussed with the pediatric side. So again, there were multiple questions which were arising in front of us, whether to start steroids. But if at all a child, again, as I said, the acute leukemia is of high possibility. So starting a steroid in this, especially in the viremic phase, there are two things. One, the viremia part can go up. Again, subsequently, the natural immune mechanism will be hampered. So second thing will be, if at all a steroid started, again, the acute leukemia which sets in might have cannot be diagnosed further. So it can, again, it will result the leukemic part. Sometimes these patients will just have a normal lymphocyte in the peripheral smear, and subsequently the diagnosis of acute leukemia will be missed. So again, whether to plan for a bone marrow in this scenario, or should we wait for one more day? All these questions we got to answer with the child, because the child was otherwise active. The child was clinically much better. So because of the improving clinically, so just waited. We did not start series on that particular day, and subsequently on the next day there was some increment in the platelet count of 26,000. So again, further without much intervention, the next day, since the child was active, since the platelet count were also increasing along with the total count, so which went up to more than 50,000, we have discharged the child, and subsequently on follow-up the platelet counts were normal. So why I am stressing is that, so in general, most of the viral illness, there can be a transient leukopenia or cytopenia, even pancytopenia, which usually will be recovering within almost 1 to 2 weeks. But this has to be taken into account. Of course, this has to be taken very vigilantly. Like we have to check for all other parameters, especially peripheral smear, whether there is a need for a bone marrow. All these has to be a question. All these questions has to be answered before taking the next consideration. So fortunately, this child just hasn't received any bone marrow, any steroids, nothing. So over a period of time, the child was active, and subsequently she got discharged. And on follow-up, the platelet counts was almost normal. Even the lymphocyte also showed a decreasing trend with almost 55%. So again, in most of the series or most of the case studies or most of the journals, whatever we have as of now, again, I'm stressing on this because there are no clear-cut randomized control trials which are available. All these are observation or case control studies. So all cross-section studies where it is just an incidence part. Again, the randomized control trials are yet to come. So whatever studies we have, so basically there was a lymphocytopenia in almost 96% of patients with severe condition. Again, severe was non-severe. The non-severe includes mild and moderate illness as per the recent criteria. So severe versus non-severe. The incidence of lymphocytopenia was almost 96% versus 83%. Again, the thrombocytopenia is almost 57% versus 36%. Leukopenia was almost 63% versus 33%. So, what are the causes for the lymphopenia? Why there is a lymphopenia in COVID illness? So, these ACE2 receptors, which we already discussed, is also present in the lymphocytes. So, when there is a lysis of the cells of this AC receptor with the EC receptors, eventually the lymphocytes also get lysed, so there can be lymphocytopenia. So point number 2. Next, the cytokine storm, again, which is characterized by the many like multiple levels of interleukins which are released. This can lead on to some lymphocyte apoptosis, and subsequently the cytokine activation can also have an effect on the atrophy of the lymphoid organs, including the spleen, which results in the lymphopenia and the lymphocyte turnover, and the coexisting sepsis, which will have in some patients, can lead on to lactic acidosis, and this also inhibits the lymphocyte proliferation. So all these are the possible hypotheses for the lymphopenia which sets up in case of COVID. So again, the studies say that when we should take into consideration all these lymphopenias. So when the absolute lymphocyte count, when it's less than 800, we have to take it as significant unless proved otherwise. Again, the nadir or the lowest lymphocyte count, which is usually happens in the day 7 of illness, subsequently it increases from that day. So the day 7 will be the ultimate day where there can be a maximum decrease in the lymphocyte, that's a lymphopenia. So that's why the day of illness is extremely necessary. So whenever any patient comes with COVID, I tend to ask about the day of illness or a day of first onset of symptoms, and then we will calculate the days from that point of time. Again, the recent studies did not show any alter in the CD4-CD8 ratio because of both are getting decreased. Because we all know that CD4 and CD8 are usually like helpful in the cell immunity versus humoral immunity. So thus there is a decrease in both CD4 and CD8 lymphocytes, and there will be overall lymphocytopenia, which usually will recover over a period of time mostly in 2 weeks. So coming to the next important aspect of hematological parameters is neutrophilia. Again, these neutrophilia is because of multiple hypotheses saying that that's because of the release of cytokines. The neutrophilia can also be because of the viral induced inflammation, and most likely can be because of secondary bacterial infection or the sepsis. Again, whenever patients with the high neutrophil counts comes in, so we have to think in terms of bacterial sepsis in the second phase of the COVID. So this is what I'm discussing case number 2. So case number 2 is basically a 56-year-old gentleman who presented with the complaints of fever, cough for almost 8 days. He also had history of cough, loose stools for 3 days. Otherwise, there is no history of transmission in the past. Otherwise, no other clinically significant any illness or any comorbidities in the past. He presented to us on day 9 of illness, and he was found to be RT-PCR positive, and the CT-CVRP score was almost 9/25, which says some almost is in the moderate sort of illness. The opinion sought was basically for the severe anemia with a hemoglobin of 4.8, and total was leukocytosis with 67,000. Again, seeing these counts with severe anemia, again our first DD from hematology point of view will be tubular leukemia. So again, otherwise examination wise, he was afebrile after coming here. The oral cavity was normal. There was no palpable nodes or no hepatosplenomegaly. So the CBC was again showing the, apart from this bicytic like severe anemia with leukocytosis, the platelet counts seems to be normal, which is not usually pattern in the leukemias. Usually in leukemia, the platelet count will be very less, especially it will be very severe either. Otherwise, he also had elevated renal parameters of creatinine 5.6 with elevated LFT of bilirubin 3.1. Again, all these soon after seeing all these reports, of course, we will be tempted to be like thinking in terms of acute leukemia. So basically, we have done a peripheral smear. Again, the peripheral smear showed a leukoerythroblast blood picture with a mild left shift. Again, this can be in any sort of severe illness, sepsis. But one thing which has a clue for sepsis is that it shows some toxic changes in neutrophils with the neutrophil glycocytosis. Again, there was the second DD was almost a sepsis with the COVID. So we have done a bone marrow. The next, even despite being in COVID ward, we done a marrow, and the bone marrow does not show any abnormal cells or blast. Thankfully, it just showed a florid erythroid hyperplasia. So the reason for the anemia probably might be some autoimmune features which has set in, and so these autoimmune, because we already started on steroids, we could not work up for further autoimmune workup, like autoimmune cytopenias, like autoimmune hemolytic anemias, but eventually, over the period of time with antibiotic support and other COVID management, the count started to there was a downward trend, and the counts fall to almost some 13,000 at the time of discharge. Again, he had a severe lymphopenia. If you see that the lymphocytes only 9% of 67%. So again, what I'm trying to say is that these lymphocytosis or neutrophilia or lymphopenia, all these should always taken into consideration with the clinical scenario. Just because we have seen a high counts, we need not think of treating anything. So this has to be taken for further evaluation. So coming to the various markers for inflammatory response, again there are n number of papers to say that to give a prognostic in markers for the COVID, these are the markers which have been routinely used for the NLR ratio, there is neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, derived NLR ratio, platelet to lymphocyte ratio, and lymphocyte to monocyte ratio. So what has been commonly used is this ratio, that is NLR ratio. So this is basically the neutrophil versus the lymphocyte ratio. So here there are studies which show that when the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio is more than 3.3, so especially when the age is more than 49.5 years old, the NLR ratio is more than 3.3. So this particular set of group of patients should, in the non-severe category, has to be closely monitored, and that's because there is a high chance of transformation into severe cases in a period of 6.3 days. So any such patients with the NLR ratio more than 3, with more than 50 years old, take it as granted. So it has to be very, very closely monitored because there's a high chance of severe progressing to severe cases. Whereas the vice versa, with the age is less than 50 years and the NLR is less than 3.3, so these patients are usually mild, and there is a high chance of cure and discharge in approximately 2 weeks of time. So similarly, the studies which use the platelet and lymphocyte ratio, where the PLR ratio is more than 180, again showed that the PLR ratio in this particular age group, as there is a tendency to change into severe category in almost a span of 8 days. Subsequently, if it's less than 180, these people are usually getting discharged in a period of almost 16 days. So all these NLR ratio or the platelet lymphocyte ratio can be taken as a prognostic marker, but all these studies are done in the 2020. There are no recent studies like 2021 which has come in, because this happened in the first phase of COVID. So certainly now this NLR ratio is not being followed in most of the established centers. So coming to the next case, a 26-year-old gentleman who presented with fever for 5 days, with again vomiting, loose stool for 3 days, severe malaise with fatigability, and outside he has done RT-PCR positivity, but RT-PCR test was done, but he is not sure whether he is positive. But considering a category like fever with vomiting, loose stools, almost in this pandemic, everyone has to be treated with as COVID unless proved otherwise. So instantly he was found to be thrombocytopenia with a platelet count 23,000. Hence he was referred here. Here our RT-PCR test came negative. So otherwise on clinically is normal, with the vitals are stable. So apart from this platelet count of 15,000, the total count was also less, almost 3,500, but the neutrophils are only 13%. Again, this raises lots of questions whether it is something else, it is some other leukemia which is setting in. So surprisingly, the markers of inflammatory response like ferritin and D-dimer and ferritin was very high, and D-dimer was 2,700. Again, this usually happens in COVID illness, and the CRP was not too high; it is 1.1. So again, the PFS smear showed the neutrophilic leukocytes with toxic change. So again, sepsis were being considered for this case. So because of this scenario, we have proceeded with the bone marrow because of monocytosis in the peripheral smear with severe thrombocytopenia. So this showed a variably cellular marrow, that is hypot normal cellular, again which shall happen in any sort of viral illness with some mixed hyperplasia. Again, this tends towards ITP. So subsequently, when he was further followed up, further investigation showed he was dengue positive, and he was managed conservatively. So again, this I am stressing here because in the last week or last 1 week, we have seen almost some more than myself have almost seen more than some 5 to 7 cases of dengue positive. So the dengue is also, when it is correlating with the COVID positive, the ferritin can be very high, the D-dimer can be very high. So all these should also be taken into consideration. So not all fever is COVID. There are other viruses which are there, and that also require some sort of treatment. Again, he does not require any sort of systemic therapy, like he just managed with other antibiotics and all those things, and the fluids and hydration, and he was managed conservatively, and all the parameters subsequently got reduced. So at presentation, the platelet count was 15,000, and subsequently the platelet count at discharge at almost 1.8 lakhs without much of an steroids or anything else. So again, as far as COVID is concerned, the thrombocytopenia, which can occur in almost, as I said earlier, almost 60% of cases. So what are the causes for the thrombocytopenia? So what are the hypotheses? So the hypothesis is like there happens a significant endothelial damage, which results in the platelet activation and aggregation, and the thrombotic part, which happens predominantly in the lungs, which results in a consumptive thrombocytopenia. So there are also some studies which show that there is reduced release of peripheral circulation of platelets, increase the platelet destruction because of the autoimmune response, which eventually leads on to ITP over a period of time. There are many cases of COVID with ITP. Again, this virus not only affects the AC inhibitors in the lungs, these AC inhibitors, AC receptors also present in the bone marrow, like hematopoietic stem cells. So sometimes there can be a cytopenia of varying cellularity even with COVID alone. So coming to the next most important aspect, that is the coagulation and the fibrinolytic system. So the SARS-CoV affects the ACE2 receptor, which is present in the pericytes, which is the wrapping part of the endothelial cells. So this, when gets affected, this results in the platelet aggregation and the activation of the von factor, which eventually leads on to thrombus formation. And this results in the increased D-dimer elevation, and this platelet aggregation results in thrombocytopenia. So coming to the next most important topic, that is the D-dimer. So every time there is a question like D-dimer in COVID. So most of the studies have not given any clear-cut value for D-dimer. Everywhere it is mentioned that D-dimer is being monitored, like is increasing and is being monitored in a routine basis. There again, the D-dimer has to be followed in a series of events, and it has to be concluded further. So, but as such, D-dimer has no utility in the diagnosis of VTE. It has a poor positive predictive value, but a very, very high negative predictive value. So, all these studies have mentioned that the D-dimer of more than 2000 nanogram is associated with almost 3 to 6 times of more chance of mortality, and more than 7000 has been associated with PE also. So usually what is the cutoff, or there is no clear-cut guidelines saying that this is the D-dimer cutoff which has to be monitored, or this is the D-dimer cutoff which has to be below which we need not monitor also. So in general, the 3 to 4 times elevation of D-dimer levels definitely requires a thromboprophylaxis for COVID. So again, this is the pictogram which shows that, so elevated D-dimer with marked thrombocytopenia, usually if it is positive, if there is a marked thrombocytopenia, which usually the categories as platelet counts are less than 30,000, if it's the elevated in PT and if it is decreased fibrinogen, ultimately this the thing which we have to suspect is DIC, because DIC have a decreased fibrinogen, increased PT, increased APTT, and very, very less platelet count, and with the high elevated D-dimer levels. But in COVID, what actually happens is there won't be significant marked or thrombocytopenia. Usually there is a mild thrombocytopenia, usually with the platelet counts of almost 1 lakh, with typical CT changes with a high von factor and high factor 8, which usually are acute creatinine, which might be high because of any sort of inflammation. Whereas in case of HLH-like syndrome, there is a hemophagocytosis and macrophage activation, this leads on to hypercytokainemia, and subsequently this again leads on to all these coagulopathies. So when there is severe cytopenia with the reduced levels of RMTS, again T3P should be considered. Again, in our setup or in most of the institutions, there is not much of a privilege for all these high-five tests like RMTS or von factors or factor 8. So all these has to be taken care clinically most of the times. So coming to the anticoagulation part. So if for all the D-dimer is high, so what will be the next option? So what anticoagulation has to be given? That is again the most asked question as far as hemoptysis is concerned. So again, the factor 10A and factor 2A induce the is also like theory says that the factor 8 is also involved in the activation of SARS-CoV spike protein, which promotes infectivity. So ideally, the drug which inhibits the factor 10A will be the drug of choice. So hence LNW can be considered as a highly potential anticoagulation in case of SARS-CoV is concerned. So because it inhibits the replication of SARS-2, also it shows high amount of anticoagulation. So hence LMWH is preferred over unfractionated heparin. Again, most of the studies, if you take as far as COVID is concerned, almost always all the studies have used only LMWH. So even the patients who was on warfarin even before COVID has to be switched over to LMWH. And the newer drugs like oral anticoagulants like apixaban, rivaroxaban, so all these are not usually, as of now, not much studies are there. The reasons being there can be some drug-to-drug interactions with the antivirals, like especially with ritonavir or lopinavir, and the tocilizumab, which is the anti-IL-6 monoclonal antibody. So that's why comparing to oral agents like the warfarin, as we already know, that there is even just with the warfarin there will be multiple drug interactions. So that's why warfarin versus Novavax is generally not preferred. So the drug of anticoagulation of choice is basically LMWH. So again, how to give is usually we will give 0.6 ml OD for almost 10 to 14 days as per the recent guidelines are concerned. So again, why can't we use unfractionated heparin? Is again many questions were there. So unfractionated heparin can also be used because it has good anti-inflammatory effect, but the predictable response is not there in case of unfractionated heparin. Again, there is a chance of hit, that is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia is also there. So compared to unfractionated heparin, the LMWH is the most preferred drug, especially as far as COVID is concerned. Again, the oral anticoagulations, or there are not much studies to show the effect of the or Novavax. So when to stop the platelet, when to stop the LMWH is the next question. So when the platelet counts are less than 30,000, or when the fibrin level is less than 1 gram, then the LMWH can be stopped. Until then, this can be continued, because as we discussed earlier, this thrombocytopenia can be because of COVID illness, especially the severity of COVID almost inversely correlate with the level of the thrombocytopenia. If the thrombocytopenia that is severe or thrombocytopenia is less than 50,000, there is a high chance of that means there is a very severe case of COVID setting in. So that patient generally requires definite anticoagulation, which usually happens with the LMWH. So abnormal PT or APDT is definitely not in contraindication as far as thrombotic prophylaxis is concerned. So coming to therapeutic anticoagulation, who requires therapeutic anticoagulation? So the patients with pulmonary embolism or previous events of thrombosis or atrial fibrillation, or morbidly obese patients of more than 40 BMI, these are the group of patients who require a therapeutic anticoagulation. Again, what is the drug of choice? Again, LMWH is a drug of choice. Here, you will give this 1 mg per kg BD as a therapeutic dose for LMWH. Again, most of the studies have said that even if the patient was on previous and anticoagulants like oral, especially warfarin, has to be switched over to LMWH during the period of illness. And subsequently, who develop DVT during the period of hospital stay, again LMWH is preferred, especially in case of acute thrombosis. So only when the creatinine is less than 30, it will be generally avoided. Until that point of time, the LMWH can be continued. So coming to the next case, case number 4, it's a 40-year-old female who presented with fever, cough, and routine symptoms for almost 3 to 5 days. There was no issue of blood transfusion. Then the CD score was almost 6, again which tends towards the moderate severity. So the opinion sought here is for basically severe leukopenia when they were the total count was only 760. So again, an examination, there was the splenomegaly almost 4 to 5 centimeter. Otherwise, when taking clear-cut history, the patient was basically a known case of CLD with the secondary hypertension. Even the previous records in 2018 and 2020, which we checked to our database, even those times the total count is very less. It was 1,600 and 2,200. So here now the total count is 720, but eventually she was treated by systemic stage and anticoagulation. Further, the counts have come up by itself. So again, as we already said, the clear history of previous all the illness, what are the drugs, whatever she is taking, he or she is taking, all these has to be considered before starting any therapies as far as hematology is concerned. So one last line about the HIT, because the heparin is being used as heparin and LMWH is used as an anticoagulation. Of course, HIT has to be taken into consideration. If at all there is a rapid drop in thrombocytopenia, especially after day 7 of infusion of heparin, the timing of platelet count and thrombotic event which is there, and other cause of thrombocytopenia has also be ruled out. Anemia, as we all know, it's a very common in COVID. It's on the incidence almost 30%. The reason being that these SARS-CoV also attack the beta chain of hemoglobin, thereby reducing its level. So when to transfuse blood products, usually the transfusion blood product is not recommended unless there is a gross derangement of values, or when there is a gross PTA derangement. So all these studies they mentioned that there's only 13% of chances for a transfusion despite all the cytopenias. So the blood component therapy should not be instituted based upon the laboratory result, because there will be a tendency for thrombotic events just with transfusion alone. So coming to next case, basically she's a 3-month-old girl who presented with joint pain for almost 3 months. This happened in the month of February. So subsequently, she was diagnosed in a very renowned hospital as probable juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and she was started on steroids. But from that point of view, there was a persistent lymphocytosis. The lymphocyte was almost 85%. So because of the persistent lymphocytosis, she was referred here. Again, on examination, there was multiple cervical nodes, cervical axillary, lingual nodes, which is palpable, almost on 1 centimeter. So 1 centimeter in 2 years age definitely is considered significant. Otherwise, the vitals are stable. Surprisingly, the counts were also normal. The hemoglobin is 7.4. The total count is almost 10,000. But the differential wise, the lymphocyte was almost 91.8%. She was on depressor for almost past 3 months, but there was no thrombocytopenia or anemia. So again, the peripheral smear did not reveal any sort of abnormal cells, but like as I already discussed, this 2-year kid with multiple cervical nodes and multiple axillary with generalized lymphadenopathy with the lymphocytosis. Of course, our concern should always be to rule out leukemias. So basically, we have advised to stop steroids and BVF for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, there was not much of a difference in the counts, but the size of the node increased, and she also started to develop some sort of symptoms of fever, joint pain. So after stopping steroids, she underwent bone marrow biopsy with subregular biopsy. This was suggestive of acute leukemia, and the flow was suggestive of B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So all these days, which was treated as a joint pain, was nothing but the acute leukemia. So again, if the disease was not it was not clear cut because of the fact that she was on steroids for the past 3 months, which usually masks the acute leukemia which sets in. So after that, she was planned for chemotherapy. So we advised for admission, but incidentally she was found to be COVID positive, and even her mother was also found to be COVID positive. So because of financial concerns and they were not willing for admission. Again, that was incidental finding. She does not have any COVID symptoms like other URI symptoms, or even the fever. When she came, it was just very mild grade of 99 or something. So we have not started anything for chemotherapy or COVID either. We have advice for admission, but because of financial concerns, she went back. So she was again, because she was in home, she had a home quarantine, and subsequently just followed up. Fortunately, she did not deteriorate for a period of 2 weeks, and she got readmitted, and we started on chemotherapy. Similarly, there are many patients even with AML, MDS, myeloma, even with COVID positive. All these are incidental pickups. So we have not started any treatment for COVID. We just followed up. Of course, there was a very big concern because these patients are generally tend to be immunosuppressive. So waiting for the period of 2 weeks, generally there is a high chance for the disease to proceed and progress, and can be even fatal either. But fortunately, these patients with just under home follow-up does not have much of a illness, and they were almost stable for the period of 2 weeks. So coming to case number 6 is again this is a known patient with CLL. Basically, she was diagnosed with CLL almost some 10 years before. But even though he was diagnosed with CLL, he did not receive any sort of chemotherapy or any treatment for CLL because there was no other cytopenias, like especially thrombocytopenia or anemia. So as per the Roy stage, he can be just followed up. So he was in Roy stage 1. So otherwise, there were multiple axillary inguinal nodes. So he was found to be COVID positive, and on admission, the saturation was 92. The lab count showed WBC of 1,42,000 with a lymphocyte of 90%. So here, what we have done is that we have checked the immunoglobulin levels. It was less than 260. Generally, the IgG levels usually it will be around 800 to 1,600. And in serial patients, generally the IgG levels tend to be very less. So this is what the IgG level for this patient. So because of IgG level, again, there is high chance of infection since the patient also had saturation of 92%. He was started on steroids and other COVID medications. He was also given a dose of IVIG. So with the steroids, generally the count started to drop. Almost it went up to 1.5 lakhs, and he became symptomatically better. The only thing what we have intervened is that we have given on IVIG dose of 0.4 gram per kg. So with that, he hasn't had any sort of worsening of infections, and subsequently he was managed with other COVID medications, and he got discharged. So coming to case number 7 is a 71-year-old gentleman, known case of hairy cell leukemia. He was diagnosed hairy cell leukemia almost 2 months before. Subsequently, he was started on chemotherapy. So he actually, in his family, he had sustained some his wife had some COVID. Subsequently, he developed fever and he was COVID positive. He presented to us on day 3 of illness. He was also a non-diabetic and hepatitis B positive, and other COVID symptoms were also there. At presentation, the spleen was almost 10 centimeters. It was almost 15 centimeters, but because of chemotherapy, the spleen was in the decreasing trend now. But the CT score was almost 16. So straight away he was admitted. He was started on steroids with anticoagulation, so other antibiotics and other supportive measures. So this was the count of presentation. He just had a count of 1,000 with lymphocyte almost for 4.6% with neutrophils of 87%. So there was a severe cytopenia, probably post chemotherapy. So with that he came to us. And because of the CT score of 16, he was admitted and started on other treatment measures. But still, his ferritin kept on increasing. His D-dimer, there was a difference. At presentation, it was D-dimer 4,700. Subsequently, there was a downward trend of to 2,900. But his ferritin kept on increasing. So there was an improvement with all these measures of anticoagulation. But subsequently, there was some sudden onset desaturation, which we consider as a ischemic cardiac event. So even the top T was on the higher side. He sustained the ischemic episode probably, and the LFW, which was on OD, was made BD along with aspirin. And eventually, but even with all these anticoagulation, the platelet count never dropped, and the patient never had any sort of bleeding. So hematologically, he was doing well. Even his counts picked up almost normal count, but eventually we lost up despite all the efforts. So again, so there are certain people, even despite all the efforts, we may not be able to save. Maybe we should find out the cause for that. So case number 8 is the last case. So basically, she is a 19-year-old girl. She was diagnosed as ITP, that is immune thrombocytopenia, outside a recognized hospital in Coimbatore. And she was on steroids for the past 3 months, but she was not steroid responsive. The platelet count, initial presentation was at 20,000. It went up to almost 50 to 80,000, but it has never normalized after that. So because there was not much of an increase in the platelet count, they stopped the steroids for themselves, and they were planned for a second regimen. But she had sustained fever for 3 days, and subsequently she got admitted because of the bleeding. So she also had some oral bleeding. Otherwise, no other significant bleeding was there. On examination, oral purpura was there. So routine investigation showed a platelet count of almost 15,000. Otherwise, the D-dimer, ferritin, everything was high. So here the MPV was also very high for the platelet count of 15,000. So basically, she was planned for steroids because she presented to us with the day 3 of illness. So, but day 3 of illness of starting season, definitely it's going to hamper the vibing phase. So we decided to just manage her symptomatically. We have not started on steroids, and she was being just monitored for all the bleeding, manifestation, if at all there, and fever and other respiratory symptoms. But the next day when we were planning to start steroids, the platelet count showed an increasing trend. It went up to 25,000. And subsequently, again, we were sequentially monitoring her platelet count. So over a period of time, in almost a period of 6 days, the platelet count got normalized. Even we were like astonished, like whether it is normal or it is something abnormal, because there were multiple case reports which showed a decrease in the platelet count with COVID, and this patient actually showed an increase in the platelet count with COVID. So the platelet count went up to 1.8 lakhs without any sort of treatment for ITP per se. So again, can COVID have some benefits? Probably whatever hypothesis we can give is whether it could have been wrongly diagnosed outside or treated outside, or this platelet count is very transient. Anyway, it has to be followed up. Basically, I went into literature. There are no case reports as of now to show any sort of spontaneous remission of ITP. But COVID has some benefits in Hodgkin's leukemia, because Hodgkin's lymphoma, sorry. So there are case reports which show the remission in Hodgkin's lymphoma. There are multiple case reports also. So maybe I'm searching for the one which there is a spontaneous remission of ITP. This particular patient will require further monitoring and follow-up. So take-home messages is that as far as hematology is concerned, please don't treat the values, rather treat the patients. Look into the clinical symptoms, signs, day of illness of COVID, and subsequently we can treat the hematology parameters. No single value is constant here. Hematology, there will be day-to-day variations, there will be interlab variations. The variability is very high, that because of the standard deviation which usually followed with good lab. So always look for a trend in counts rather than a single value. So all these the counts, if at all thrombocytopenia is there, please look for the drop in trend or increasing trend of the counts, and subsequently we can decide what to do, when to intervene. The day of onset of illness is very, very important as far as COVID is concerned. Again, the peripheral smear will give us a clue in most of the clinical scenario. The mild to moderate cytopenia in any lineages usually will recover within 2 weeks of time. So any patient with mild cytopenia, mild leukopenia can be followed up, provided the serial counts are being monitored. If at all the anticoagulation has to be given, especially with the high D-dimer values or high ferritin values, the LMW is the anticoagulation of choice. The role of Novavax still needs better evidence, because many centers they are giving Novavax, but there are not much of evidence as of now. Thank you. I am happy to take up the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Sridhar Gopal, for your excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And very useful, informations. As far as I am also concerned. And any questions are welcome to Dr. Sridhar Gopal.
Sir, one question is posted by Dr. Harish Kumar, our chat box, sir.
Yeah, please read it.
Hello. Can I ask a question? This is Dr. Tyagaraja Murthy.
Yes, sir.
See, regarding
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
see, why did ferritin go up? And what,
Yes, sir.
is it because of the breakdown of RBCs or?
So the ferritin is basically an acute phase reactant, sir. So any acute phase reactant, so the ferritin it can go up in any sort of acute illness, sir. Acute stress, it can go up.
Yeah.
So this ferritin, especially in this scenario, in the over period of 3 days or so, I've seen more than ferritin. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Sir, in this past 3 to 4 days, I've seen patients with ferritin more than 5,000. So
Yeah.
all these happens to be the patients with dengue rather than COVID. Even today, I saw a patient with ferritin of more than 5,000. So he happens to be dengue positive.
Okay,
So there
on
are
this.
cases in the ward also. So what I'm saying is that the ferritin is reactant. So this can go up, even it can be very high either. So this again has to be sequentially monitored. One thing is that the ferritin is thrombogenic. Even ferritin is also thrombogenic. Just because the ferritin is high, there are some centers who are giving thromboprophylaxis for this high ferritin also.
So what are the indications for rivaroxaban and other new anticoagulants?
Sorry, sir?
See, 2 questions.
Yes,
The D-dimer, how long does it take for the D-dimer to come down? Suppose if they are 1 month down the line, if the D-dimer is still high, and those patients are high risk for thrombosis. And what are the indications for rivaroxaban and these type of anticoagulations?
Sir, as far as all the studies or all the journals, they have not mentioned the duration of the anticoagulant, sir. So even the recent categories, they have said that the anticoagulation has to be given for a period of 21 days. For that too, they have said about the LMWS. And nowhere there is a clear-cut data to say that either the oral anticoagulations will be beneficial or where the parenteral anticoagulation like LMWS can be converted to Novax. There is no such clear-cut yet. So even I was also searching for that. I could not get anything. So, but the D-dimer, it takes some time for some certain set of patients. Sometimes the D-dimer is almost as high as 3,000, 4,000. But these patients are also coming to a follow-up without. So again, there is a very big question: what to do with that such patients? Whether to start an oral anticoagulation, whether to start an acetylon? No, sir. Even I don't know, sir. Sorry for that.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dr. Kumar here.
Yes, sir.
So I've seen in some patients, the ESR was like high, it was like 80, 90 and all. Whereas CRP was almost in normal ranges in quite a few patients. Why is it so? Quite a few patients, it was like say ESR used to be high and CRP were normal, and WBC counts also are in normal range or less than normal also. 3.5, 4,000 like that.
Sir, especially the patients who are with any sort of liver illness, especially the chronic CLD or the acute liver failure, usually the CRP won't be high, sir. Even though in a clinical state of infection, even inflammatory responses, the CRP generally won't be very high, especially in case of liver patients. So that one that has to be that can be considered. Similarly, the ESR can be very high. Again, all these are inflammatory responses. So that's what all these, the one single value, it's not won't be useful at all. So whatever values are very high, even CRP, ESR, D-dimer, ferritin, this has to be sequentially monitored, and then we can get some sort of evidence from all those things, even the counts.
Yeah. Even this particular patients which I'm talking about, they were monitored 2-3 times during the course of the illness. ESR like from 90 it came to 60 or 50, but persistently ESR used to be high, whereas CRP was 3, 4 or 5, only that much. It's a huge difference.
So the CRP generally it will be high in the sepsis, sir. So ESR can be high in any sort of infections, but in general the CRP, even procalcitonin, will be more high when there is a sepsis sets in. So initial phase of viremia, the ESR can be very high, but rather the CRP, only if the sepsis part sets in, it can be high. That's what we can take it into consideration, sir.
Okay. Again, a particular patient, almost all the reports were normal, but IL-6 alone was high, continuously near around 800, 900. So IL-6 alone was high. Whereas D-dimer, CRP, and blood counts, all others were not, ferritin, all were normal. Only IL-6 was continuously, we sent it to 2-3 labs also, but IL-6 alone was individually high. Does this indicate this that STROM or other things, whatever we say, cytokine STROM and other things?
Yes, sir. If IL-6 is high, yeah, we can definitely consider that.
But patient is stable, no fever, saturation is normal, everything was there. But IL-6 alone was continuously high for almost more than a week. Any specific reasons?
No, sir. I'm not aware of.
Any systemic infection like SLE or something could be causes for that?
No, sir. I'm not aware.
Okay.
IL-6, no, sir. So generally, it can increase cytokine storm, sir. Again, cytokine storm can happen in any sort of infections. As I said, even HLH is also a possibility. So without much of a clinical scenario, we can't clearly say what.
Okay.
எத்தனை
4,500 அது மத்தியமா போட்டாச்சு 4,000
சாமி பரவாயில்ல நமக்கு ஏதோ உபயோகமா. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, then it is my privilege to thank all the consultants and senior doctors and practitioners from Coimbatore and from inside the hospital. And I also thank our speaker of today, Dr. Sridhar Gobal, for his excellent lecture on post-COVID hematological presentations. In around 8 cases he has presented, and it was a wonderful lecture altogether. I thank Dr. Sridhar Gobal on behalf of the management. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Murali.
Thank you, sir.
So good evening. Listen.